Hello, welcome to this video. Thanks so much for tuning in, sharing this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness. Clearly, I'm in a blue mood today. I'm blue, da-dee-dee-da. There's a lot of energies that are being kind of jostled around right now, and I want to just start off with a little energetic update, and then I'm going to go into flow with the guides for anyone interested. The vision I was shown, that is a picture of a human being, and this human being is just a beautiful human. And they kind of showed me the picture of, like, those pictures of the Homo sapien going from one version to the next version to the next version. Well, that's what the guides showed me. Like, we are now that next version of the humans. And I'm getting that hit that not everybody's going to feel like that, and not everybody's going to see that in the collective, but we are. There's a huge, our evolution. It's a little bit of the 100th monkey. You guys haven't looked up that before. I think it's called the 100th monkey. And I'm going to share that with you because this is something that I'm being called to just dive into just a little bit. All right, now I see why I was called to look that up. So if you go on Wikipedia, which I actually like to use it for a lot of things, even though I don't take any of these websites as full 100%, this is it. So the 100th monkey effect, ironically, is an esoteric idea. And I want to just dive into this a little bit because this is the other message that's coming through from the guides. The 100th monkey effect is an esoteric idea claiming that a new behavior or idea is spread rapidly by unexplained means from one group to all related groups once a critical number of members of one group exhibit the new behavior or acknowledge the new idea. The behavior was said to propagate even to groups that are physically separated and have no apparent means of communicating with each other. I'm just laughing at this because of all of the mainstream places that are adding things like it was an esoteric. Well, let's play with that for just a moment. So first of all, I want to just invite everybody. What I do notice is that sometimes people will read something, and because it says one word in it, such as esoteric, or they'll say something like, well, it was unexplained, or it was said to, it's an idea claiming. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because this is what we're watching happening through our social networks oftentimes. And sometimes it can go either way. We can be crediting something that isn't real or discrediting something that is real. And this goes back into our using our discernment. So my guides have been saying over and over and over again, and it's funny because sometimes I'm like, well, I want to channel something about, the earth changes or whatever. And I've written tons of papers about it, but I don't feel called to share it all because we can change our potentials at any given moment. So that's something else I want to talk about, but maybe in another video. So what I'm being shown is that multi-layers here. So I would encourage anyone, so the feelings and the emotions, recognizing through our feelings. The guides have been talking over and over again about emotions, feel, 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 feel. And part of the reason is that when we are disconnected from our feeling sensations, it takes away, or we do not provide ourselves with the ability to actually be able to feel into what is real and what is not real. Because there's a lot of things that we're looking at, that we're watching, that we're listening to, that are fabricated. But when you have enough energy projected into a particular fabrication, it materializes in more density and becomes more esoterically real. I'm just playing with that to kind of give us an idea that we create this, sometimes the momentum or the charge or the electrical stamina, right, to keep things going. So there's an idea that, so if we're not able to feel and we're just following the leader, because one of the other messages that came through was individualized leadership. Those words came through, and also convolution. So those are all the stuff I'm going to touch on briefly. So if we are paying attention with our brains, our logic, analyzation, which I'm not saying that is very valuable, but we're not feeling into what we're paying attention to, or we're basing our feelings on emotions that are learned, essentially habit patterns, triggers, things like that. It's difficult for us to differentiate between what's somebody else's and what's ours, what we need to process, what maybe we can let go of, what is, what might be something that's actually dangerous for us, like our natural senses. When there's danger, you can feel it usually. If there's excitement, you can feel it. If there's something kind of nefarious going on, nefarious, you can feel that. I used to work years and years ago in a bar, right? And I worked around, it was fun most of the time. There was music and dancing and drinking, but you could sense when there was going to be a fight. If there was an art, you could just feel it. You could feel it in the air, or I could. And I would get really good at being able to identify immediately who was going to be a problem. And I'm sure people that are in work security or that are in law enforcement, their senses are heightened to that, because that is a practice that they do to strengthen, or they practice strengthening those feelers, right? They pay attention. They're not only using their analytical, okay, this looks suspicious. Intuitively, we can sense when something is suspicious. But if we are so trained to not look at that, or to not utilize those senses, or to more importantly, not connect the two, and this is kind of where I'm going with this, we are then shut down in those departments, in those areas, and we begin to operate from a lesser amount of energy, power, and a knowingness, and we begin to operate with only a part of what we know, and we make decisions from only knowing that much. So it's all connected, it's all tied together. And the more we can realize we need to connect these senses, reconnect some of the things that have been disconnected. And I keep getting a picture of synapses, right? That synapse branches out, it looks for, it's seeking something to bond with, to connect with, to grow, like the mycelium underneath the forest floor. We are walking trees, so to speak. We are walking living organisms that are constantly learning and adapting and creating and storing information and retrieving information. We're conductors. So you get where I'm going with that. So if we're limiting ourselves, and it's based on what we've been told or what we've habitually been programmed by our families, our parent, not blaming our families, but let's face it, some of us grew up in an environment where this is the way. Others grew up in an environment where that is a different way. It's from our religious upbringing, all of it. So it's just part of our package. So we were pre-packaged from our childhood, right? Maybe not where we adapted behaviors, we adapted to these patterns, and they became part of our package. When in actuality, the vision I'm having is of us stepping forward and becoming into that individual leadership, we're starting to recognize the distortions. We're starting to see through the fabrication that has been created that we were molded into before. And this is coming from a place, if we can find compassion and non-judgment, the more we feel and allow those senses to come on board online, I'm going to go into flow with this. We are less bored with our reality. We become more in alignment with what it is that we seek to create from a place of enhanced behaviors, enhanced techniques. And this has an effect on the collective. So I'm going to go back to what I was saying about the 100th monkey effect. Whether or not this story, which by the way, they're saying it's an esoteric idea, but then they share the story underneath of the actual story. So theoretically, it's not. So that would be a fabricated statement based on an overview. It's not necessarily wrong, right? But it's not accurate either from another perspective. So they're making it as accurate as possible to cover all the bases. So if this is what's happening with some of our information that we're reading or acquiring, I'm hearing acquiring, inquiring about. So I'm being called to play with that. Are we inquiring or are we acquiring it? So there's a play on words about that. I'm hearing listen to the choir. What does it sound like? Is it off key? We won't know unless we're really listening and feeling with all of our senses on. So this is something we're remembering how to do, or we could say we're learning how to do, or we're expanding and evolving into now remembering what we've always been able to do, but we haven't had necessarily the guidance or the encouragement to behave in this way. Because if you're stepping out as an individual leader, it's difficult to be led by a fabrication. So I'm tying this all together, right? We start to recognize and differentiate between what's real and what isn't. But simultaneously, a lot of what's real is also being shifting into something else. And that's a different video. All right. So I'm just going to say back to the 100th monkey effect. I would encourage you to read it. Basically, it's talking about between 1952 and 53, primatologists conducted a behavioral study of Japanese monkeys on an island. So, and I'm going to totally butcher it, but Kojima? The researchers would supply these troops with sweet potatoes and wheat in open areas, often at beaches. An unanticipated byproduct of the study was that scientists witnessed several innovative evolutionary behavioral changes by the troop, monkeys, two of which were orchestrated by one young female and the others by her siblings or contemporaries. The account of only one of these behavioral changes spread into a phenomenon, the 100th monkey effect, which Watson would then loosely publish as a story. So hence the claim or esoteric. So I don't understand why that would be esoteric if it really happened. See where I'm going with this? So I want to just pause and point this out because this is another message that's coming through. We're bridging the esoteric with the scientific. And we're starting to realize that a lot of the scientific is esoteric because esoteric is actually science. We just have been in these compartmentalizations of how the body works, how physics is different than this. And we don't use this to actually use that because we have to keep everything separate. But as spooky and what we don't understand, we call spooky. So this story is spooky. It's action at a distance, but that would be science, wouldn't it? So I like to play with this a little bit. So we're being called to inquire. So I'm inquiring now. Why is this esoteric again? So it says, according to Watson, the scientists observed that some of the monkeys learned to wash sweet potatoes, initially through this 18-month-old female member named IMO by the researchers, IMO, of the troop in 53. She discovered the sand and grit could be removed from the potatoes by washing them in a stream or ocean. Gradually, this new potato washing habit spread through the troop in the usual fashion through observation and repetition. Unlike most food customs, this behavior was learned by the older generation of monkeys from younger ones. And I feel like this is very symbolic. I'm getting goosebumps. The behavior spread up until 1958. According to Watson, when a sort of group consciousness had suddenly developed among the monkeys as a result of one last monkey learning potato washing by conventional means, rather than the one monkey at a time. So the whole collective did. Watson concluded that the researchers observed that once a critical number of monkeys was reached, the 100th monkey, for example, the previously learned behavior instantly spread across the water to the monkeys on nearby islands. And I love this. So, there's a book on here. It's The Biology of the Unconscious, Life Tide. I've never read it, but this sounds like something I would enjoy reading among all my spare time, right? So the group consciousness is a thing in political science, refers to the phenomenon in which members within a social identity group become aware of how their group identification impacts the position in society. So I'm going back to the spooky action at a distance. Let me fix my. So the reason I'm called to bring this up is a lot of this stuff is actually being tied together now. And we're starting to see it kind of leaked in here and there, but it hasn't been fully, it's not being fully talked about. I think what's going to happen is a year from now, people are just going to be like, yeah, spooky. It's a 100th monkey, action at a distance. And it's going to just start to be accepted as the norm. But we're still in this somewhat awkward growing phase where there's some people who don't want to leave that and other people that are full on embracing this, such as myself. And so there's that bridge, right? So I talked about this before. It's like a time lag time. How much are we hearing? I went to the store the other day and all of the front little display were aliens. I was like, all right, I love that. It's starting to become, and granted, it was a big deal like in the 50s, right, with Area 51, and everybody was going to the desert, and nothing has really happened since, but actually it has. We just aren't seeing it all across the news. So what's happening is there's a lot of information that's being retrieved, right? That's being accessed, that's being disclosed. People just aren't looking at it. There are a lot of people that are, however, starting to recognize it, starting to be curious, starting to read books. So by the time I feel that we get actual disclosure about certain things, people will be like, yeah, we knew that the whole time. So and it's funny because it's even like thinking about, for those of you who have done channeling for a long time or tarot cards or whatever it might be, psychic readings, whatever it is, we're starting to see it become very normal. Like there's so many people that do that now. And energy. I remember I used to use the word energy healing and people would be like, what is that? Now everybody's like, oh yeah, and Reiki. Oh yeah. So things start to become, a little bit more merged. We're just at this really strange, awkward phase is what I'm being shown. And it is a phase. That's a play on words as well. So action at a distance. So the 100th monkey, from my perspective, is a form of action at a distance that can be seen. Now, I know that I'm not defining this properly to some, but I get my information by merging things. I get my information by zooming out and combining words. I get my information to better understand how things work that aren't necessarily literal, but it's a good way of kind of, I'm hearing redefining the definition, but also allowing a bigger visualization or understanding of it by utilizing these examples. So action at a distance is a concept in physics that describes the interaction between two objects that are not in physical contact, but still affect each other's motion. Now I'm saying this because granted those monkeys on the island were all physically in contact with each other, but on the other island that started washing their potatoes before they, ate them, weren't physically in contact. So how did that happen? And that's where I go back to what that's when there's anything that they can't explain, they being whatever system that is, that was the old paradigm, they will label it as certain words, such as esoteric. Now, let's play with that for a moment, because theoretically, or not even theoretically, it happened. They just can't explain it. They're calling it esoteric. But actually, it's been explained. So therefore, it's a fact, right? It's been explained through Einstein. Spooky action at a distance. I guess he didn't really explain it, but he introduced the theory or concept in physics. But that's been proven since by other scientists, that it's real, and there's actually a name for it. I know it's not coupling, but I can't remember what it is. Sorry, Dan Winters. I would encourage you to watch some of Dan Winters' stuff. He does he's the mad scientist about all this, and I still can't quite wrap my brain around it. Clearly, I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it, but I can understand it. And if I can understand it, anybody can. I can understand it to a certain degree. Doesn't mean I can teach it. So it's based on the idea that a cause can produce an effect in a different location without the use of a medium to transmit the interaction. Now, here's where I would like to just interject from my perspective, from my inner knowing, from my own intuition, but in addition to my acquiring knowledge to essentially validate what I've written about, just in my little bubble of reality. There's always a medium to transmit the interaction. The aether, the air that we exist within, is a medium. And the person's body is a medium, right? So all of us are a medium within a medium. Because what is a medium? Well, I like to think of it, because the guides always talk about artwork. Your medium is what you're using, right? So let's play with that. Boy, we're going down the rabbit hole. So I'm just back on Wikipedia. And if you go into, not Medium, I was going to look up Medium, but it's that, well, okay, that would be valuable. So just playing with that, right? It's the material or technique used to create a work of art. So mediums can include paint, inks, sculpting materials, the fabric, the glass, even sound, or living people in some cases. So sound, and if we're talking about everything is sound, right, from a certain vision of a wave, then the medium is not separate. It's all connected. So that would be my very, very simplified way of explaining that. Now I'm also called to go into medium. A medium in waves is the substance or material that a wave travels through. It can be a solid, liquid, gas, or plasma, and water. So let's play with that just for a moment as well. And I will get to this in just a moment. Or the reason. Fields is an alternative. It does talk on Wikipedia about this. If you scroll down, Maxwell started with elaborate mechanical models, but he used dynamical vector fields. The sense that these fields must be set to propagate light set off a search for the medium of propagation. The medium was called luminous aether, or the aether. And that's a whole other video, because isn't that kind of everything? So anywho, the reason I'm going down the rabbit hole is because there's just this continual separation to figure out the source of this oneness, when theoretically there is no separation. So that's a reflection, or this is an example of me going back to the 100th monkey effect. So the guides are like, look, you're as we step forward as individual leaders in our own lives, and we lead from the heart, and we lead from this propagating wave form that is higher vibrational, that is speaking with love, that is listening and feeling through all of our senses, that is able to access pure potential, I'm in flow right now. And as we access this pure potential, it creates less of a divide. Therefore, the 100th monkey effect is what is provided. We provide the opportunity for others to see and travel through their own field in this teaching remembrance. So that's the message that's coming through. And I might do a channeled flow at the end, but I'm being called to finish this thought wave. Also, sidebar, I was guided to look up the word convoluted because a lot of people are like, things feel so convoluted. I'm like, well, let's play with that word for a moment also, because, turn this down a little bit, because, yes, but what is convolution? Well, convoluted is when things are twisted up, right? So I'm just being called to play with this. They're twisted up, they're very intricately involved and complicated, right? But in mathematics, ironically, particularly in functional analysis, which is studying primarily vector spaces, which I just said is something that they've used to discover or to study aether, putting those two synchronicities together. And it helps to define spaces, right? But also what it's saying is it's a mathematical operation on two functions that produces a third function. So one of the messages that's been coming through is things seem convoluted because we're going through convolution. Like we are coming from here, we're creating this third, right? Like flower of life. And I'm not referencing 3D. I'm referencing it's evolution, it's expansion. It's like, well, we thought we only had these two options, but look, because we've combined this, even though it feels like we're pulling apart and separating it, because of that ripple effect, now a third branch has been created. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that's what my guides are trying to explain is happening within the kingdoms, the reality vectors is what they're calling it. So, I'm being called to play with that a little bit. So hopefully this is making sense. So let me just give a recap. Essentially, 100th monkey, we are the monkeys. Sounds terrible. But we are the beings who are creating this ripple effect through spooky action at a distance by us basically showing up and living our lives, accepting, coming into a place of equilibrium, maximizing our human potential, fulfilling our opportunities. That's a play on words, by the way. Okay. I was trying to give a recap, but let me just play with that. And then being curious, adapting, but using our heart as the primary resource. And what's interesting is the heart is twisted. It is a spiral, right? So we are essentially unwinding and creating more space. It's not that we're going to unwind the heart, but we're opening, right? We're opening a vortex is what I'm hearing. And as we open this vortex, we create, I'm hearing expandability. We create more space and expandability that allows us to adapt to the motions in the ocean. Emotions allows us to adapt and create a new signature pattern, a third frequency that is now blendable and blends and merges with what it is that we are becoming, with what it was that we can still take with us as our foundation base, as a medium, as a source of energy that we are utilizing as we create a new reality. And so I was hearing the word perforated. I kind of knew what that meant, but let's look that up. A hole made by boring or piercing, an aperture passing through or into something. And this ties back in with what my guides had said a few days back, that we were in a dispersion portal. I know. I said I was going to keep this simple, but bear with me. So, a hole made by, so perforation, of course, I was thinking like a hole puncher, right? But an aperture passing through or into something. And I'm always called an aperture to talk about the lens. So if I look up photography, the adjustable opening in a camera lens that controls how much light enters the camera. So a larger aperture lets in more light when a smaller aperture lets in less light. So there's something going on esoterically here, but also potentially quantumly or scientifically where there's more light that's coming in. So there's something about this perforation. And if there might be more meanings that are tied in with that as well that I'm just not aware of. But for me, it leads me to just aperture. So it's like creating this opening, this space in which that light can come through. And this, we are having this impact on one another, whether we realize it or not. But we're also being called to realize it, to recognize it, to feel it. Because sometimes when all this stuff comes up, we're feeling the anxiety, we're feeling the fear, we're feeling the dilemma that we might be facing. However, we're able to sense something bigger behind it, or we're able to feel the light. I'm seeing aperture again. We see more light at the end of the tunnel than we were able to see before. In some cases, and I'm hearing clairvoyantly because we're able to see clairvoyantly. We're able to hear our guides. We're able to feel through clair. That's another clair I always forget. That's one of my main things I started with in this field, if you call it that, was feeling. I mean, I would walk into a room and feel, and it would be nerve-wracking a bit because I wasn't used to it. I didn't recognize that that's something that I had adapted or I had adapted to. We all come in with that, I think, for the most part, but we tend to shut that down, or we tend to sometimes tell ourselves it's not real, whatever it might be. And for some of us, there's very good reason. You know, maybe we had a difficult childhood and we couldn't always be heightened because it would be very challenging, speaking from my own experience. So I'm going to end on that note, and I think I'm just going to go into a totally different video and flow. But I will say that this energy that we're all adapting to is creating more light. But as more light comes up, of course, we're going to see a lot of the icky stuff. We're going to feel a lot of the icky stuff that was essentially keeping things together, you know, like that gum, MacGyver, right? Keeping the gum is like, now it's starting to pull apart and we're like, ew, that was stuck to my shoe. Well, no wonder why I've been walking crooked, you know, big piece of gum. It was big league chewing gum. The whole packet stuck to the bottom of our shoe. And then along with that, it brought up all the dirt and all the stuff that was stuck to that. And that is starting to come apart at the seams. And so what seems sticky is actually in the process of dissolving. And so we are invited to really feel that, because it's giving us an opportunity to utilize our senses to be the leaders and stop looking outside of ourselves for leadership, to say, you know, I could do that. And boom, there we go. Once we set our minds to that creation, someone who really is lined up with what I was saying before, they're allowing themselves to feel into their future, which I did a video on recently. It's almost like the doors begin to open as we step forward into our fullness, as we start to embrace our own leadership role, as we start to roll into where we are best resourced, where I'm hearing our true resource, our true development. Then we are able to then assist in the development of the world that we really want. And this takes time from a linear perspective, but it's happening now from a spooky action at a distance perspective, right? It's already here. So feeling into that. In love and light, guys. Thank you so much for playing in this wordplay. Namaste.